This podcast does not provide medical advice. Please listen to the complete disclosure at the end of the recording.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Everyone Dies, the podcast. I'm Marianne Matzo.
And I'm Charlie Navarrete, waiting for my mother and father to confirm. Actually, my mother is dead, so there's a lot of pressure on my dad, who is 96, and no spring chicken.
Well, but we've done enough shows about talking to people after they've died that you've got other options.
That's true.
Just saying. So relax, get yourself something good to eat, or get yourself something bad to eat, or just start drinking. And thank you for spending the next hour with Charlie and me. In the first half, we have our recipe of the week, and Charlie's going to read to us from a book about ALS that was written by a Silicon Valley engineer, entrepreneur, and author, John Ferriolo, who actually happened to have died on July 16th, 2021, after living with ALS for 7 years. And the book was published in 2021, and he used an eye program where he would move his eyes in order to type. And I was saying to Charlie before we started recording, it's like, I get so annoyed with my computer when it doesn't behave. I can't imagine sitting and moving my eyes in order to type. But, he had a lot of wonderful things to say, and I appreciate that he wrote it and put it out on the internet. And all of those resources, the links, everything is with our show notes, so please check out his book. In the second half, I'm going to be talking about what amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, otherwise known as ALS, what it is. And in our third half, we're going to be sharing a letter written to his grandchildren by Joe Ferriolo. And we thought that was really pretty poignant. So, Charlie, our grandson is turning 5, and we're talking to him yesterday. And, they're stationed in Japan now. Mm-hmm. And so he always wants to show us his toys. And before each toy, he'd say, dun, 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 dun. And then he'd show, like, the Godzilla, or dun, 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 dun. And he'd show you the next thing. And it was so funny. So I feel like I need to do, Charlie, what do you have for our first half this week? Dun, 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 dun.
Ossi di Morti cookies, or Bones of the Dead. And yeah, who wouldn't jump at the chance of that as a snack? So these are Italian cookies baked for funerals and to celebrate the Day of the Dead each year. The cookies are called Bones of the Dead, not only because of the day on which they are eaten, but because their shape greatly resembles that of bones. It's nice people have enough time to shape bones into cookies, or their bones into cookies. Well, you decide. We're still kind of a democracy. The cookies are long and flat with occasional knobs. You can interpret knobs any way you wish. And a tray of them, cookies, not knobs, will be whimsically irregular in shape, like a true pile of bones. Creepy? A little. Delicious? Oh, hell yes. Ossi di Morti makes use of the season's first almonds, which are harvested in September. Hey, we're recording this in September. Whilst, for all you Shakespeare fans, one of the virtues of nuts, I won't go there, is that they are delicious year-round. There is nothing like the intense flavor of freshly harvested nuts, almonds.
I don't know that I've ever had freshly harvested almonds, but
Mm-hmm. Almonds are a joy, especially in that candy bar. Almond joy.
Yeah. Sometimes you feel like a nut and sometimes you don't.
That's true. Very true.
I feel like a nut every week when I record with you, Charles.
It's kind of nutty, yeah. I also want to read to you a few paragraphs from John Ferriolo's book, Kinda Ugly, about his life with ALS. This links to his work in the show notes and on our webpage. Here are Mr. Ferriolo's words, with apologies for butchering the pronunciation of his name. I was diagnosed with ALS in July 2014. ALS has taken from me many things I used to cherish, Work, which I loved, spoken conversation, eating, cuddling, scratching my itches, hiking, biking, sleeping on my side, contributing around the house, etc. Most people take these things for granted and are very tough things to lose forever. But to my surprise, I found that there were other joyous things in life that remained for every major thing that I lost. First of all, I got to spend more time with my wonderful wife, Karen. The children called and came to visit more often. Karen brought home a red mini poodle to keep me company and amuse me. Since my diagnosis, all 3 daughters have married great guys. I now have 2 grandsons who are just so adorable. ALS gave me the absence of stress. No more worrying about my job or finances because I was massively disabled and will die soon. I can finally relax. I have lost all ability to use my hands, arms, and legs. I cannot talk anymore, although usually I can muster the ability to generate a faint grunt. I cannot eat or drink. I get nutrition, liquids, and medicine through a PEG, P-E-G, feeding tube through the abominable wall and into the stomach. I have a weak diaphragm, so I wear a breathing mask hooked up to a ventilator all day and night, except for bathroom hygiene. My neck is weak and cannot hold up my head well. I communicate through eye gaze technology that allows me to use a computer and to speak through voice synthesis. I require 24-hour caregiving because occasionally something life-threatening can happen suddenly. For example, twice the ventilator mysteriously stopped working while in bed, resulting in me going into distress with blood oxygen dropping from my normal 97 to 80. My wife, Karen, is my nighttime caregiver and often my daytime caregiver, who has a baby monitor on me while I sleep, with some alarms active on my ventilator that go out when it detects abnormal breathing. Despite these circumstances, I have managed to have much joy in the years since my ALS diagnosis, which I attribute to a loving and capable family, financial wherewithal, great doctors and caregivers, technology know-how, a network of knowledgeable friends, positive attitude, and finally, not taking things too seriously. So that is from Mr. John Fiorolo's book, Kinda Ugly, about his life with ALS.
We should really learn to not take life so seriously, though, too.
Yeah.
You know?
And you know what? And
sometimes we get feedback on the podcast, and people will say, "Oh my God, you're laughing and joking at the beginning." It's like, yeah, we do, and at the end, but in the middle part where we're talking about the disease or death or whatever, we're serious.
Yeah.
But you can't be serious all the time.
No. And then who sang it? Was it? Yeah, in White Christmas, Bing Crosby. That song he sang, "Count Your Blessings." Yeah, I don't think people always look on. So I remember the Monty Python song. Look on the.
Always look on the bright side of life.
Yeah.
Da-dun, 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 da-dun.
So, yeah, because things really can always be worse. It really, yeah. Thank goodness you're not in Louisiana or even parts of the Northeast, with the flash floods we had up here. But just every once in a while, just, you know what? Look at what you have, not what you don't have. Mm-hmm. And with that...
And be grateful.
Yes, absolutely. Yep.
And be grateful.
Yeah. So please go to our webpage for a link to this episode's recipe and additional resources for this program. We hope you will follow us on Facebook and Instagram, and remember to rate and review this podcast. Listen, as a nonprofit organization, we always appreciate your donation so that we can continue to offer no-cost education. Your tax-deductible donation, whether large or small, makes a tremendous impact locally and globally. Tell your friends. Please go to our webpage to donate in support of our work.
Tell your enemies. Tell everybody.
Yes.
They don't have to just be your friends.
That's true.
The way that people are going to learn about it is if you tell them and let them know there's this resource. There's things that can help. So, in our second half, I have
before we do that, let me
the job.
Before we do that, let me
What?
just give out our website. So,
sorry.
Yeah.
Oops.
Contact us, donate to us, comments, send your buttons and bows to www.everyonedies.org. That's every, the number one, dies.org. Marianne.
So, dun 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 dun. I'm going to be talking about ALS today. So, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, otherwise known as ALS, is a progressive nervous system disease that affects the nerve cells in the brain and the spinal cord, causing a loss of muscle control. Now, ALS is commonly known as Lou Gehrig's disease, named after the New York Yankees baseball player who was diagnosed on his 36th birthday in 1939 and ended up retiring that year. And he had been on the road, actually, and he was tripping, more clumsy. And when he got back home, his wife said, "You're going to the doctor." You know how wives are. And he was diagnosed with ALS. So, I'm a geek, so let me give you the Greek language. So, amyotrophic comes from the Greek, A meaning no or negative, myo refers to muscle, and trophic means nourishment. So, literally, it means no muscle nourishment. When a muscle has no nourishment, it atrophies or it wastes away. Okay? Lateral identifies the area in the person's spinal cord where portions of the nerve cell that signal and control the muscles are located. As this area degenerates or breaks down, it leads to scarring or hardening, or the other word is sclerosis, in the region of the cord. Now, ALS is a progressive disease that destroys the nerve cells in the brain and spinal cord, which control the muscles throughout the body. When these nerve cells, also called motor neurons, die, the brain can't send impulses or messages to the muscle fiber, which normally results in muscle movement. So the brain thinks it sends it along the pathway, and then the muscle moves. Well, with this damage, with the sclerosis, the brain thinks it gets to that area of scarring and stops. And the muscle sits there and says, "I don't know what's going on, but nobody told me to do anything." And so there's no muscle movement. The disease most commonly affects people between the ages of 40 and 70. There's as many as 30,000 Americans with the disease at any given time, 20% more common in men than in women. About 90% of ALS diagnosis occurs without a family history, so it doesn't run in families. And if it's no family history, it's called sporadic ALS. So that remaining 10% of diagnoses are inherited through a mutated gene, which is known as familial ALS, comes from the family. Now, for some unknown reason, and I thought this was really fascinating and really unfair, but military veterans are up to twice as likely to be diagnosed with the disease as people in the general public. And they don't have any idea why that's true, but twice as likely.
That's weird.
So the earliest symptom of the disease depends on which nerves or muscles are first affected. Any muscle group may be the first to show signs of the disease. For example, a person might experience twitching or weakness of the muscles of the hands or the lower legs. If the muscles of the face or throat are affected, the problem at onset would be difficulty talking, chewing, swallowing, movements of the tongue and face. If the muscles of the chest are affected first, that person would have difficulty breathing. For some people, the first symptom may be involuntary crying or laughing. In the beginning, muscle groups on only one side of the body may be affected, but as time passes, more and more muscles on both sides of the body are involved until the person becomes totally paralyzed. But throughout it all, a person's mind is unaffected.
Jeez.
And to me, from
Yeah.
my value system, and I'll acknowledge that, is that would be, I think, so hard.
Yeah, that would
to
be hell for me.
have
Yes. Yeah.
everything in your brain absolutely
Yep.
working,
Yeah.
and your body not responding at all. I just whoever thought of ALS, I just think that that's a bad way. I mean, I think about I'd rather have like Alzheimer's where I don't know
You
what's
don't know
going
what's going on, right?
You know,
Yeah, I understand.
your body moves and all of that, but I'd rather not know about it. But anyway, that's me. Nobody chooses any of these diseases, and my heart goes out to anybody who's diagnosed with them. But I think it's important that you know what goes on. So, how fast the disease progresses and in what order this occurs is very different from person to person. The average survival time is 3 years. About 20% of people with ALS live 5 years. 10% survive 10 years, and 5% will live 20 years or longer. So, Stephen Hawking, for example, was diagnosed with ALS when he was in college, and he lived a really long time.
Yes.
Now, I suspect that as time goes on and we learn more about these diseases, that what Stephen Hawking had was maybe not ALS, but something else, because he really did live a long time. So, progression is not always in a straight line in an individual. It's not uncommon to have periods of lasting weeks to months where there's little or no loss of function. There are even very rare examples in which there is a significant improvement and recovery of lost function. These ALS arrests or reversals are temporary. Okay, they are temporary. Less than 1% of people with ALS will have significant improvement in function lasting 12 months or longer. So as I said, the progression is going to differ with each patient. Not everybody has the same symptoms or speed of progression, but it's generally divided into 3 stages: early, middle, and late. So early stage ALS, because Charlie, I know you were going to say, well, what is these different stages?
Well, what are the different stages,
Let me tell
Marianne?
you. So, well, gosh, thanks for asking.
Sure.
So the early stage of ALS, first and most common ALS symptoms are muscle weakness and atrophy, or the wasting away of the muscle. Other symptoms of this stage include cramping, muscle twitching, known as fasciculations, stiffness and tightness, known as spasticity. Like I know somebody who wasn't able to lift up the gallon of milk anymore. It's like, why can't I lift up a gallon of milk? Well, it's that muscle wasting. These symptoms usually affect one part of the body to begin with, and depending on which neurons are affected first, in most cases, these are neurons that are controlling the arms, hands, or legs. A common condition that's known as limb onset ALS. Even in the early stages, ALS symptoms make it hard for people to perform everyday tasks such as cooking, dressing, getting around, to loss of manual dexterity in the hands, and awkwardness of the legs and feet. middle stage ALS. So as symptoms progress to the middle stage, muscle weakness and atrophy get more pronounced and start spreading to other parts of the body. Some muscles will lose strength, while others will become completely paralyzed. At this point, many ALS patients have profound difficulty with or are no longer able to walk or use their hands and arms. Some muscles near the joints may become permanently contracted, like clenched or closed up,
Yeah.
which prevents the person from straightening out that affected limb. People with middle stage ALS start to lose the ability to swallow food and their own saliva. It's called dysphagia. And they may lose the ability to cough or breathe on their own, which increases the risk of choking. Muscle weakness in the throat can make it difficult to speak and breathe. That's called dyspnea when you have trouble breathing, due to a reaction called the pseudobulbar effect, where some ALS patients will experience bouts of uncontrollable laughter or crying. And you'll see this pseudobulbar effect in other neurological diseases. You could see it in Alzheimer's, you can see it in Parkinson's disease. It has to do with neurological damage where people will just start laughing or crying. And I have bouts where I have uncontrollable laughter at things that most people don't find funny, but I don't think that it's suitable affect. I think it's just being a nurse for too long.
You just like laughing at your own jokes. Got it. Okay.
I do, because who's funnier than me?
You want
Late stage
alphabetically,
ALS.
I'm sorry, what? Sorry.
Late stage ALS. So as the person progresses to late stage ALS, most of their voluntary muscles will become paralyzed. So voluntary muscles are anything that you tell yourself, move your foot, move your arm. Those are voluntary. I can control whether or not those move or not. Those are voluntary.
Mm-hmm.
Involuntary muscles are things like breathing and your heart beating and that kind of thing. So voluntary muscles, all of those will become paralyzed. When this happens to the muscles in the mouth and throat, as well as the muscles used for breathing, like the diaphragm, you're not able to speak or eat or breathe on your own, which requires a feeding tube and a ventilator for those tasks. And we're going to talk about ventilators in ALS next week, because I decided that we would talk about how to diagnose and how to manage symptoms in a whole separate show, because it's a lot. So, and the ventilator is one of those things. It's the management of ALS, and so something to talk about. You noticed that in that thing from John, he talked about being on a type of a ventilator. And so, you have a CPAP machine for people who have like sleep apnea that continuously blows in air to keep the back of the throat open so that they breathe. That's not what we're talking about. There's something called BiPAP. Now, BiPAP is like a respirator,
Mm-hmm.
but different in that you wear a mask, and it blows the air in, and then there's a pause. So it's not CPAP where it's continuous positive airway pressure, CPAP. This is BiPAP, meaning that there's a breath and a pause. Okay, yeah. So that it is sort of like a ventilator, but not quite. So those are options in terms of people wanting to use it. Always remember, I think we always need to remember that not starting something is a lot easier than starting something and then having to make a decision not to continue to use it.
Okay.
So I'll put that out there, but we'll talk more about that next week. Most people with ALS die within 2 to 5 years after the symptoms first appear, usually of respiratory failure or malnutrition. So either they're just not able to breathe anymore, or they're not able to get enough nutrition in through their feeding tube. Other less common causes of death include pulmonary embolism.
Mm-hmm.
This is due to obstructed arteries to the lungs, so that there's this like a blood clot will go to the lungs, and that's the cause of death. There could be a heart arrhythmia where the heart's beating too fast, too slow, or irregularly, or pneumonia due to breathing in food or water. Because if you have a feeding tube, it's easy to aspirate, meaning that food or fluid goes up into your throat and then into your lungs. So next week we're going to talk about diagnosis and management of ALS. But for our third half, Charlie's going to read a letter that John Ferriolio wrote to his grandchildren. Charlie?
Dearest Theo and Grafton, and any other grandchildren that may bless our family. This letter is from your grandfather, John, who is sometimes known as G. I have written this letter so that I might have a connection with you even after I have vanished. As I write these words, I am in my wheelchair while breathing and wearing a breathing mask that is connected to a ventilator. I can't use my arms or legs. I can only talk by spelling words with my eyes and using voice synthesis. I can't eat or drink. Instead, I get my food, water, and medication through a feeding tube. My body has these problems because I have a disease called ALS, which began around age 60. The disease makes your muscles not work. Scientists are working hard on finding a cure, but unfortunately, they will be too late to help me. Most of my muscles have already quit working. I had a wonderful life before the disease, and I have had a wonderful life living with the disease. Throughout my life, I have given and received much love from family, friends, co-workers, caregivers, doctors, nurses, and others. Having love in your life is more important than money, fame, accomplishment, various kinds of pleasure. For example, eating tasty food, and the occasional approval from a cool person. But love is not the only thing. To be happy, most people need to develop skills that will allow them to contribute to the world, have self-respect, and make enough money to pay for essentials, such as food, housing, transportation, medical care, and a little entertainment. The most common way to develop skills is through school, in some cases many years of school, but there are lots of different paths to learning. You will almost certainly have to work hard over a long period to perfect your skills. Find things you love, or at least enjoy, to do as your career so that you enjoy the time spent learning and using your skills. My biggest regret is not being sufficiently social. In social situations, I was often timid. I avoided social events, primarily out of bashfulness and social phobia. Looking back on my life, I have had the greatest success when I was part of a team. I had my own talents, but all significant accomplishments are too complex to do all by yourself. Engage with new people. You will be surprised at what they can teach you. One of the ways to meet new people is to sign up for activities that are not part of academic schooling or are outside of your job. Be brave and be strong so that you can meet the challenges and overcome the obstacles that will come your way. Nothing worthwhile is easy. Be honest with yourself. Everyone has their limitations. Don't try to be a person that you were not meant to be. Cut yourself some slack. We are all highly imperfect human beings. Each person is gifted in some ways and deficient in others. This is true for everyone, including me. You, your parents, siblings, friends, teachers, and bosses. Your parents can and will make suggestions. They will try to protect you from bad choices, but ultimately, you have total responsibility for your life. Do not discard advice from family. Listen to what they have to say, think, ask questions, search for answers, and then make your own decisions. Remember that your family loves you and wants you to have the best possible life. Be good to others, especially family. Have fun along the way. Keep smiling and laughing at yourself and the world around you. Make music, draw pictures, play games, and most important of all, dance, just like you're good. And know that I love you. That's it for this week's show. Please stay tuned for the ongoing adventures of Everyone Dies. And thank you for listening. This is Charlie Navarrete, remembering the words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. that if a man has not discovered something that he will die for, he isn't fit to live.
And I'm, Marianne Matzo, and I'll be seeing you. Remember, every day is a gift.
This podcast does not provide medical advice. All discussion on this podcast, such as treatments, dosages, outcomes, charts, patient profiles, advice, messages, and any other discussion are for informational purposes only and are not a substitute for professional medical advice or treatment. Always seek the advice of your primary care practitioner or other qualified health providers with any questions that you may have regarding your health. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard from this podcast. If you think you may have a medical emergency, call your doctor or 911 immediately. Everyone Dies does not recommend or endorse any specific tests, practitioners, products, procedures, opinions, or other information that may be mentioned in this podcast. Reliance on any information provided in this podcast by persons appearing on this podcast at the invitation of Everyone Dies or by other members is solely at your own risk.